We began by writing classes that had static methods, and then we moved on to writing classes like this one that have non-static methods. So in this video, I'm going to talk about writing a class that has both static and non-static methods. It's going to be crazy, so hang in there. So first, let's look at this class. So obviously, I'm having a cookie fundraiser, and I want to keep track of the name of the student that sold cookies and how much they sold in terms of dollars. So here I have a constructor, and I'm initializing the name of the student and how much they sold. Again, these are called instance variables up top because every cookie fundraiser object is going to have a name and an amount of sales, student sales, I'm calling it. And then I have just one additional method. It's my toString method. Remember, I told you that toString is a special method name. It always returns a string which tells me about the object. So here I'm returning the name of the student and how much they sold. All right, now we're going to look at the tester and see how that works. This is the tester for the cookie fundraiser class, and I called it cookie tester, and this should be nothing new. I'm just creating a new cookie fundraiser object called C1. I'm running the constructor, and I'm passing it the name Aiden, and I guess Aiden sold $100 worth of cookies. And then I'm running the toString method on C1, and I'm printing that out. And then I'm making a cookie fundraiser object called C2, and I'm doing the same thing. That's Alex, $50, and I'm running the toString on that. C3, same deal. So this is really nothing new. Now, I have mentioned before that toString is a special method name. It's so special, as a matter of fact, that Java knows to run the toString method if you just say the name of the object, as I'm saying right now in this print line statement. So this, just saying C3, is actually going to run the toString method. The other thing is, of course, I like to name my things. Well, I'm calling it C for cookie, of course, but I'm naming my object C1, C2, C3. You don't have to name them that. You could call this pizza, I don't know, asparagus and broccoli if you wanted to, right? I'm just showing you, I just like to organize them C1, C2, C3, and I'm going to compile and run this thing, and it's not going to be any great surprise here. It should tell me something about these objects, right? It's running the toString on C1, that this guy's name is Aiden, sold $100, Alex $50, Morgan $60, so forth. Underneath it, I drew a little picture of really what's going on. Every time you create a new object, so this represents object C1, C1 is pointing. When I say pointing, it means C1 is a location somewhere in computer memory that contains the address of this first object. I know I'm saying it's a little maybe weird that I'm saying it that way, but C1 you have to think about is really pointing to a box that contains information about C1, which is somebody's name and their sales amount. C2 is the same thing, C3 is the same thing. So really what I want to point out here is that every time I make a new object, each of those objects gets their own copy of these variables, name and student sales. So this name over here is not the same as this name over here. It's C3's name. They're both called name, but this is the name associated with C3. Hopefully you get what's going on there. All right, now we're going to talk about adding some static variables and methods. Now I've decided that not only do I want to keep track of how much each student sold, but somehow I want to keep track of the total sales. So for example, in this case, it would be 100 plus 50 plus 60, that's $110. The problem is total sales, and here's my variable name right here, total sales doesn't really belong in any particular object. It's really a variable that applies to all of the objects. So I really don't want it inside of these little boxes. I don't want every object to have their own version of total sales. I want this to belong to the whole class. And as a matter of fact, sometimes these variables that are outside of the individual objects are called class variables. So how do you make a class variable? Oh, maybe you're one step ahead of me already. So let's go back to Cookie Fundraiser. Now I've modified this a little bit. And here it is. I've created myself a double named total sales, and I'm giving it an initial value of 0, and I made it a static variable. When you use the word static here, what that does is it makes only a single copy of that variable. That variable is no longer related to an individual object, it's related to the whole class, just by using this word static right here. The other thing is, when you make a static variable, it only gets initialized once. It doesn't get, this is not going to get reset to 0 every time I construct a new object. It only gets set to 0 one time when you create the first object. Okay, so here's my variable called total sales. Well, how am I going to accumulate the total amount sold? In other words, every time I add a student, I have to add to total sales. Well, here I'm doing it right here. It's really not that hard. So I'm saying total sales equals total sales plus whatever that particular student sold, right? This is how much a particular student sold. I'm adding that to this total sales variable. Okay, great. Now, how can I access this variable total sales? This is a static variable. It's not inside the object. I know I've said this before, but I like saying it a bunch of times. This variable does not exist inside a specific object. It belongs to the whole class. That's what static variables are. So let's scroll down here. Now, I added this method. This method is a very simple method. It's a static method. Notice I put the word static here. Public static double total sales returns the total sales. A static method, by the way, can only access static variables. Actually, as a matter of fact, if I said something like return student sales, let me just copy that and paste that in there, I would get an error. Like if I hit compile, it says, if I click on this, non-static variable student sales cannot be referenced from a static context. Yeah, basically that means if you have a static method, you can only access static variables. It doesn't make sense to access, because whose student sales would this be? So let me just undo this if I can. Sometimes it doesn't work that well. Oh, yeah, wow, it worked. All right, so I'm going to say this one more time. I've made myself a static variable, which means this variable does not live inside a single object. It belongs to the whole class. There's only one copy of this variable. And every time I create a new student, I'm adding however much that student sold to total sales. And then I made myself a static method, which returns total sales. Great. So let's go back to the cookie tester. And I'm just going to add one more line, and I'm going to cut and paste it because I cheat like that. I want to return the total amount sold. So what is that? What is the name of that method that I want to run there? It is called get total sales. I'm just going to run it. And this is going to be my total sold. And let's see if this works. This is very exciting. So I'm going to run it. Oops, compile again. Uh-oh, do I have an error? Oh, I'm sorry. Look at this. I'm glad I did that. Wow, I'm glad I did that. That's great. I don't know what I'm thinking here. I can't run the method this way here. I can't just say get total sales. This method exists in this class. How am I going to run this method? And I can't believe I forgot that part. Could I run it on C1, C2, or C3? Well, no, that doesn't really make sense. This is a class method. I need to run it on the class. The name of the class is Cookie Fundraiser. And you have run static methods before. The math class contains a bunch of static methods. That's why you say something like math, math.pow or math.abs, or there's various math methods that you've run. Those are static methods, and you run them by naming the class dot the method that you want to run. So now this is going to work. What was I thinking before? I don't know. Here we go. Very exciting. And there you have it. So maybe I should say this one more time. A static method is a method, and let's take a look at it. A static method is a method that can only operate on static variables. Now, I guess I should qualify that by saying I could have a local variable in here. That's okay. I could make myself a variable, say a, that equals 0. That's okay. But in terms of the instance variables, I can only access the instance variables here And actually, by making it static, it's not really an instance variable anymore, but I can only use the static variables up here in my static method. And I hope that makes sense, which I know I say way too often, but I hope it does. And again, making a variable static means that it lives outside of all of these boxes. It belongs to the class. It does not belong to an individual object. All right, this was a bit of a tricky video, and I hope you're with me for the whole thing, and thank you so much for watching.